What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Tim Reviews Everything. Guys, if you guys are not subscribers, I really appreciate it. If you do that, I am really trying to grow this channel. So if you guys want to continue seeing videos like this, please help me grow. Subscribe, share my content, give me a thumbs up, leave comments in the comment section below, and I appreciate it. Guys, in this video right here, I did a review on my job. I am a warehouseman, and I was just trying to give people an idea of what to expect on your first day and basically what you're going to be doing probably for the first 10, 15, 20 years of your job, which is case selecting. My opinion that I gave in that video that I think it should be a short-lived thing. But guys, if you did not see this video, I would go watch this video first and then come back and watch this video. So in this video, a lot of reaction. I had over 6,000 views on that. For this channel, guys, that is a lot. I had well over 100 views. I think I'm actually creeping up on 200, or not views, but comments. And, people just asking, hey, I'm starting a job. Any idea, any tips you can help me on building a pallet or whatever. So the only problem is I don't case select anymore unless I work overtime. It's summertime. I don't like working overtime in the summer. I probably will be working overtime in the winter again, fall, winter time. So what I did was I took pictures of other people's pallets, and I'm going to try to help you guys as much as possible. I do work in a produce warehouse where it's dairy products and produce products. We do have a dry goods building that I can work at, but I'm just not there at the present time. So all the pictures are going to be dairy products and produce products. So in this video, I'm just trying to give you guys some tips on how to build your pallets good. Focus on making those times. It is at every warehouse that you have to make in order to stay there. So guys, I'm going to move over here. Video base is everything. So in this picture right here, I'm going to be looking down at my laptop, but in this picture right here, obviously here you got a nice solid base. You got 3 rows of bananas. But the thing I like about this pallet, and this is why I took a picture of this, obviously if you have 3 rows of bananas, you're gonna have a nice base. But how he spaced out those 3 boxes of potatoes to put the bag potatoes on top. The bag potatoes come in a 5 block, and the way he spaced out those 3 potatoes allowed him to stack those 10 potatoes on top of there perfectly. Because if he would have had the brown box in the middle over towards the white box, that huge gap, that his potatoes would have been sagging. So, you start from the outside of the pallet first, and you work your way in. You always want to draw a straight line up your pallet. See, if you went all the way down to the bottom of his pallet, and from the blue pallet all the way up, you see a straight line. You want straight corners. When you start hanging over your corners, that straight line, you're asking for trouble. So over here, I got a little diagram. I want you to picture this as your pallet. I'll get to the cross later, but so when people put a case down, I've seen cases at our work hang a good 2 feet off the pallet. It's amazing how far people get off. I'm not even exaggerating. We got long boxes and people will stick them well off. Well, when you go to load the truck, guys, you're gonna smash the crap out of these cases hanging off the side of your pallet. Me, personally, I like an inch, maybe 2. I don't like to be off a lot on the side of my pallet. Just a hair. I don't like being off. Not only this, but you're just going to build a wide pallet. So back to this. So base is everything. And like I said, on that banana pallet, you can see he has a nice strong base. I'll show you another picture here. So this is a picture of a juice pallet. So I wanted to show you this picture here because you would look at this and say he has a nice strong base. And he does. He didn't do too bad on this pallet. But the second case in, you could see this case is leaning. And I could tell just by looking at this picture that there is a board missing on this pallet. It is very important that you start with a good pallet. If you're starting with a pallet that's missing a board, you're already asking for trouble before you even throw one case on that pallet. So I can tell, and I watched this guy halfway through his order. He kept wrapping his order because his pallet kept leaning backwards because of that one case leaning in that gap on that pallet. That's all it takes, guys. It just takes that one case to screw up your whole entire corner of your pallet. And like I said, you could see the case right up above it separating, and it just keeps leaning back and back and back. And then he kept throwing wrap around it because that corner kept leaning. So you got to start with a good pallet. And then, but on his cases, not too bad. I mean, I'm so ridiculous about how I stack pallets. I mean, you saw in my last video how I stack pallets. I'm real ridiculous. You know, there's certain things on this pallet I would do differently, but not bad. So guys, another thing I want to get to, same block as pallet was received. So when the full pallets come in, a lot of your trainers out there will say, here, I'm gonna throw a picture up right now. Okay, so this is Minute Maid. And a lot of trainers will say, whatever block is on that pallet, that's the block you want to build on your, you know, when you're selecting your order. I agree with this on some aspects, like on the bananas, you know, they come in a 6 block. You want to keep that as a 6 block. Potatoes come in a 5 block. You want to keep that in a 5 block. But this juice, see how they're stacked 5 across like that on the bottom? I don't like this. See that little bit of it's hanging off on each end? I don't like cases. How do I want to explain this? So right here, I got a case like this of juice on this pallet and it's hanging off. Well, I don't have a lot of case on this pallet. But if I stack the case this way, long ways, if I stack that Minute Maid, like the second level, here, let me move back over here. See the second level, how it's stacked, you know, this way. I'd rather have all of this on the pallet because I have less weight hanging off the pallet. So if I were to stack on this case hanging off the pallet, most of my weight is on the pallet. I hope this is making sense. Where this one here, if you're stacking weight on this piece right here, well, you don't have a lot on the pallet. As much as possible, you want to face cases towards the middle of this pallet, okay? So I like going this way. So I would stack 1 Minute Maid here, 1 Minute Maid long ways like this, and then 1 Minute Maid over here like this. I would do like that. I don't care if I have gaps on my base, on my bottom pallet, as long as I stay within the perimeter of that pallet. I just think it's so key to stay within the perimeter of this pallet. If you stack it their way, then you're gonna have 5 cases with that hanging off of both sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. But you're hanging off both ends. So you're already starting your pallet hanging off both ends. I'd rather space them out, and like you've seen on those potatoes, space them out a little bit and, you know, go from there. All right, guys, so the next thing, cases operate, you know, here, we could go back to this Minute Maid pallet. Believe it or not, people will select a case of that Minute Maid and turn it on its side. Whatever that case is, operate on that pallet, that's the way you should be selecting it on your pallet to go out to the store. You should not be taking a case of Minute Maid and then turning it on its side, especially liquid. I've seen people turn it on its side and I've seen people put them upside down. Keep it upright, and however it comes off that pallet is the way you should be selecting it onto your pallet. All right, guys, so cases upright. I hope this is, you know, not too slow in that, but okay, so higher cases on the outside of the pallet. This is why I got the X over here, or the cross rather. So I always like to keep, I call my corners, I want strong corners. I got this over here too, strong corners. My 4 corners on my pallet, I want the bigger cases, I want the more solid cases, and I want them here. Now, if you have all the same case, like when you're building a full pallet of juice, that's a different story. You could just, you know, fill in the whole entire pallet. But if you're in a section where you have a lot of smaller cases, whatever bigger cases are in that section, I'm putting in these 4 corners. I want my corners to be nice and strong. And then with inside the cross, I'm putting all my smaller cases. That's how I build. You know, I just feel like if you have strong corners, I cannot tell you how many times I see people just stacking, you know, small little cases on the corners, and then they got these big cases in the middle. You want your big cases on the outside of the pallet, preferably on the corners, to give you that nice, strong corner. Because if your pallet starts falling, if you have big cases in the middle and your pallet's leaning against the smaller cases, it's gonna fall over real easy. But if you have all your big cases in the corners and your small cases are leaning over, it's not going to knock your pallet over. So that's why I got that cross there. I like to, and I'm going to actually show you a picture right now over here. If you notice with his front pallet, he has those smaller creamers within the middle of his pallet. I totally agree with the way he has his front pallet right now. You want to keep that stuff on the middle. If he had that vice versa and he had all the big cases on the left side of that pallet on the inside and he had all those little creamers on the outside of his pallet, he's asking for trouble. So yeah, the way he has his pallet, that's exactly what I'm talking about with the cross. He has all the smaller cases on the middle of that pallet. So whenever he starts building on top of that, it's not going to cave outwards. If anything, it'll cave inwards. So keeping with that being said, here's two cases here. I just propped these two cases up. As you can see, that case on the right side is just a hair smaller than that box. So if you were to switch it around and have that the clear case on the outside, you're asking for trouble, especially when it's your first layer. I always say the bottom half. So a typical pallet at our warehouse is 64 cube. So I always say about waist high. I want a nice solid based waist high, and then I don't care, you know, because I'm trying to make time up or whatever. I don't care. I'm not worried so much of having a higher case on the outside or inside, because I know from this point up, it's not going to affect my pallet much. But if I start my pallet off with a lower case on the outside of the pallet, I totally disagree with this. You got a nice solid case on the inside when that should be on the outside. I hope I'm making sense. And I'm going to show, and now I'm going to put a case on top of it and show you why it makes a difference. So in this picture here, it might be hard to tell, but that case is slightly leaning to the outside of the pallet. Now, when I switch these cases around, you're going to see the gap. That little hair right there is all it takes. So now that gap is on the inside of the pallet. So when I start to build this pallet, if it starts to lean, it's going to lean towards the inside. Now, if I had that on the opposite way, like I showed you in the previous slide, that little gap would have been on the outside. So everything I put on there is just going to slowly start rocking that corner out, 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 out. And that's how pallets fall over. You got to keep the high cases on the outside so they lean in. So in this picture here, here's another example of why it's important to have the higher cases on the outside. As you can see with this, you know, cabbage, broccoli, and order, he has his lower cases on the inside, and you can see it's slightly leaning together. You want that pallet you want it to lean inwards. You don't want it to lean outwards. Just another example. All right, guys. So the next thing I want to talk about is it okay to stack cases straight up? And we get a lot of open cases in our produce warehouse. We get grapes, we get clementines, we get tomatoes, peppers. We have a ton of open cases. Open cases, what do I mean by this? This is what I mean by an open case. These are tomatoes. So yeah, open cases. I like stacking these straight up and down. This is when it's okay to stack straight up and down. Here's a pallet right here that is stacked straight up and down. You can see the strawberries on the bottom, and you know, and with that, he goes right to the next layer and he is stacking straight up and down. He got grapes on top of the strawberries, and then there's more strawberries. Yeah, guys, when it comes to our produce section, you stack straight up and down. As you can see on his front pallet, the clementines, he tied it in when he could. Sometimes it gets a little high whenever you could tie a pallet in, but that's how we do, you know, that's how I stack my product in the dairy, or I mean in the produce. Dairy section, you could tie cases in a lot better, but with the produce section, a lot of our cases are stacked straight up and down. And if you guys need to stop and wrap, you know, you stop and wrap when needed. It takes like 15 seconds for you to separate a pallet. There are a couple wraps around. You don't have to wrap the whole pallet, just a couple times in the middle of the pallet, and then keep moving on with your order. So before I move on to the next thing, to the cube, here's another pallet I just want to show you. Look how nice this pallet is. This goes back to the higher corner, or the higher on the outside. His juice pallet, I just want to throw this in. His juice pallet is perfect. Like, you would look at this and be like, man, what a beautiful start to his two pallets. Look at that back outside corner. It is low and it's leaning. He's asking for trouble on that back outside corner. I would have took the time to switch a case around. So I have a higher outside corner and put that lower case on the inside. That is just one little thing that could really make your pallet fall over once you start getting a bigger case. Or I mean a bigger order. You know, you start stacking, your pallet gets bigger. Guys, the next thing, something that is very important, is your cube. Whether you're throwing one store or two stores at one time, you want to pay attention to your cube. If you have a one pallet order at our warehouse, 64 cube is the highest we go. So at the beginning of our order on our headset, it'll say, you know, your order starts in 20 ow and it ends in 28 ow, and your cube is 60. Well, I know in my head that I know I'm going to have almost a full pallet if I have a 60 cube order. If I have a 2 pallet order and it's 128 cube, I know I got 2 full pallets. And typically they're the ones you lose time on. When you have 2 full pallets, usually you're losing time on those pallets because it's just going to take more time to stack those pallets because they're bigger and you're trying to get your pallet as perfect as you could possibly get it while moving through it, so you don't have a pallet that's going to be too tall or falling over on you. So usually you lose your time on those pallets. So when you're out of your acclimation from your training week, guys, when you get a 1 pallet order in your you know, wherever you're selecting at, and it says 43 cube or 38 cube or even 50 cube, you know it's not a full pallet, I'm gone. I'm flying through that order. That's the order I'm making my time on. So whenever I get a 128 cube order, I know that I could take my time on it because I made up my time on the previous order. So anytime you get a small pallet, don't BS, no talking, get your butt and go through it. That's on the time aspect, you know, so listen to that cube. If you have labels, we used to have labels back in the day. At the beginning of the top label would tell us what our cube is. I would imagine your warehouse has cubes. If they don't, they need to get them. So at the beginning of your order, right off your training week, start listening to the cubes. 64 in our warehouse. Warehouses could be different. 64 cube is a full pallet. A full pallet is about 6 foot high, maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little over 6 foot high. So get used to, you know, I got a 70 cube order. I know that and it's one store and it's 70 cube, I'm going to have 2 small pallets. I should be gone. I should be flying through that order because I know I don't have a lot to mess with. If my pallet's messed up, I'm only going this high, so I don't have to worry about it. But if I have a 115 cube order, I know I'm going to have a full pallet and one that's pretty high. So get used to listening to the cubes. And like I said, guys, wrap when needed. I hope this helps. You know, if I have to throw a third video out, I will. Guys, any comments, please ask them. I will answer everything I could possibly can. I just wanted to get this video out. It's, you know, I hope it's what you guys wanted. Just a little bit of tips here and there on what to do when selecting your order. And I hope you guys the best of luck at your job, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.